Hey everyone, David here. So I just finished meditating and just sitting with silence for a while. And it's interesting because before I start meditating, I sit down and I start thinking about what am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And then, like, ooh, I could bring up this idea, or ooh, this sounds really fun, or oh my gosh, I wonder if this is going to be okay, or would people like to hear this? And then after I'm done sitting down in silence, it's like, I don't need to talk about that, or I don't need to say anything, and there's nothing to do. And what shows up is this sense that um, who's talking when that voice is going on? Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And this voice says, what am I going to do? And normally the voice is saying, what am I going to do? It's actually usually more like how I am. It's usually saying, it's not actually asking, what do I do? What it's actually saying is, I'm not okay with what's happening right here, or who I am right now, or I'm not okay with this moment right now. And I want to do something to change or to get out of that moment. And so I noticed that in my body, and it looked like, what do I do? What's going to happen next? And after I'm done, it's like, I don't need to do anything. And then again, I sit down in this chair that I'm in right now, and I get ready to look at look at the camera and talk to all of you. And um, and again, there's this thought of like, oh, I could say this or I could say that, and talk about this. And then what happened is I saw myself in the video, and it's like looking into a mirror, and just decided to be with that person while they're there. Cool. Hey, Shinhua. Good morning. So I'm here just talking and sharing a little bit. Shinhua just joined the call. So if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to join. Um, but I was just, and if you want to ask any questions, Shinhua, you can just type them into the chat so that people can read them, and I'll just read your question out loud. Um, Unless you have like a specific question, then feel free to ask. But what I was sharing was that um, before I came on the call, I was just looking at myself before I came on the call, and there was this thought of, what am I going to do? What do I want to say? There's different questions that have been coming in, and instead I just looked at myself like the person uh, in the call, kind of like a mirror, and I decided to be with that person, make eye contact with that person, as if it was me, and or as if it was somebody else. And I noticed myself starting to like feel teary eyed looking at the person in the mirror, and it's kind of like if you've ever done an eye gazing activity at any of our events where you're just looking at somebody and you kind of feel moved to tears. And I noticed that you can actually do that with yourself, and take a moment to actually look at yourself in the mirror and have a release and a relaxing of the identity or the ego that's trying to hold himself up, or herself up in that. And then I experience my body relaxing and like tears showing up and then releasing in a sense of like everything's going to be okay. And so normally when we ask ourselves the question, what do I need to do, or what do I got to do? What do I need to do next? Usually underneath that is this idea that right here and right now there is not okay, or there's something wrong with right here and right now. And so I got to do something to make it different. That doesn't mean that there aren't anything to do or that we don't do things. But when the come from is that there's something wrong with right here, we're not really living from our souls or from our heart, and God can't speak to us in magical ways in little moments. And when we do, when we're listening to our bodies and we're coming from this space of everything's okay, every moment kind of can speak to us, and every emotion can speak to us. So that's what came up for me as I was joining the call. There were a few questions that came in beforehand, so I want to speak to a few of the questions. Um, One of them was around like sadness. So someone had mentioned I feel sadness in my body, and I was sitting down and I just felt a deep sense of sadness for around 5 to 8 minutes in my body. And I was wondering, what do I do with that? What do I do with that strong sense of sadness in my body? And what comes up is just, thanks for asking the question, but also when there's an emotion showing up and you're taking the time to sit in silence, usually there's a voice that says, what do I got to do? And again, the what do I got to do with this emotion is the same thing. There's something wrong with me feeling this way. And when our body is feeling something, that's what's happening right now. And it's a part of your body. And all there is to do is actually feel that emotion, give yourself space to feel that emotion. When we feel sadness, especially a strong sense of sadness, what we tend to do instead is think about the emotion, and we try to think our way out of an emotion. And so most compulsive thinking comes from this sense of not wanting to feel something. And so also compulsive behavior can come from that there's a particular emotion that we're unwilling to feel. And so in sitting with the sadness, and allowing ourselves to be with it without trying to think about it or judge it. Things come up and we allow them to come up. And you recognize that who you are is not that sadness. There's just sadness happening in your body. And when we are not the sadness, when we are not the emotion, we're just watching it and allowing it to come up and fully feeling it. Then the emotion has space and it doesn't take us over. But many times when an emotion comes up, because we don't want to feel it, what we do is actually let go of who we really are, and we just become that emotion or become that ego and become obsessed with it, and the sadness takes us around. So it's not I am noticing sadness in my body. All I am is sad, or that's all that's there. And so when sadness comes, what there is to do is to just watch it. And every kind of uncomfortable emotion or every huge emotion that comes up, or even sometimes a sense of emotional pain, those can be where our greatest lessons come from if we're willing to sit with them and allow them to move through our bodies. And so with the emotion of sadness, I'd recommend taking more than 5 minutes to sit with it. Try sitting down for 20 minutes and just breathing through the sadness, noticing where it's at. You might have thoughts that show up or images of the past that show up or a face that shows up. And instead of getting stuck on the thought or the image or the face of whatever comes up, just be with that emotion and be with the sadness and let it wash through your body. And again, during the last session of the Coming Home Online journey, we talked about how emotions rise up in 90-second waves when we're a space to feel our emotions. And so allowing the waves to rock your body and move through you, it's actually your nervous system letting go and passing on into a new version of yourself. And so I would recommend spending 5 to even 20 minutes or more, if you have the time, to sit down and be with yourself. And then who you become is not the sadness. Who you become is a sense of greater love that can hold on and hold space for that sadness. And it's like we talk about your physical mind and your spiritual mind uniting, and your spiritual mind is connected to life. It's connected to the universe. It's connected to God. And most of the time we are not in our spiritual minds. We're not in that space. We're totally in our physical mind. We're totally locked in our nervous system and in the throes of pain or pleasure. But when you expand that, when you make space for it, who you become is not what's inside the space. You become the space you become that which can hold it, that which is around it. I was just posting on Instagram, Kyle C says something like, when an emotion's coming up, it's like you're in the restroom and something's coming out, something's coming out. And most of the time it's important to realize that you are not what's coming out. You're the space that's allowing it to come out. And so the quote is that you're not the poop. Don't worry about it. You want to just let that come out. Let the emotion come out. You're not the poop. You're the butt. You're the space you're the space that's holding room and holding space for whatever emotion to rise up. And as it rises up and leaves your body, you'll begin to learn new things about yourself. Like, for example, even right before this call started, and I noticed myself making eye contact with myself in the mirror and noticed sadness showing up in my body and a release and tears showing up. And just being with it, not trying to say, ooh, what does this mean? Or what's going on over there? And just letting it fully flow out, and the wave passes through after 90 seconds. And what I noticed is that there was an old way that I used to live my life. And the way showed up where I would just get so prepared and get such a high state where I'm ready to go, that it didn't matter what I was feeling. I could just snap out of it and just shift into some kind of higher gear emotion and perform. And I was lucky enough to be able to say the right thing or make people laugh on stage or coach this person in a certain way. And I could do that all without being fully present to my own body and what was there. And what happened when I allowed the sadness to flow out of me, what showed up is in my body, it was telling me, you can relax now, and that it's okay. And that you don't have to be this amazing person or transforming the people on stage. I don't have to be who I was on stage to be loved. And there was a space and a permission to just be who I am. And then the interesting thing of what shows up after that is new ideas start to show up, new life starts to flow into you. It's kind of once you let go of what the emotion is or let go of whatever you're holding on to, then God or Heavenly Parent or the universe flows into you and flows through you, because now you've made space for the universe. But most of the time we never make any space for new ideas to happen. And so we're kind of just caught moving back and forth and in the busyness of it all. And it leads to the next question. I think this question was from Sunwan. It was, how do you find peace and calm in the busyness of it all? And what I would do is just question, what in the world is the busyness of it all? What is the busyness of it all? Because if you look at, you know, when we think of we're so busy doing everything, the busyness of it all, most of the busyness of it all exists in our own heads. That like all the things I have to do that are coming up, or all the things that I've got to worry about, most of those things exist as thoughts in our head and are about the future, but none of that is actually happening right now. And so, like, I remember sometimes I was on a call with a client, and they're like, we were talking about emotional wellness and healing. And at the end of it, they're like, that's great, David, but what about when you go into the real world and you go back into the real world? And I just want to question, what in the world, what is the real world? Because when I really got down to it, what the real world is when this person goes back into their car and he begins to drive back home and begins to think about all the things that he has to do. And then once he gets home, he'll eat or whatever, sit on the couch, and then start to think about all the things that he has to do. And that's the real world. And I think I would confront and say that world is so not real, and so much less real and less present to what's happening in your body right here and right now, and what's available to you right here and right now. And so I think one thing is to let go of the myth of the busyness of it all, that it all has to get done. Most of it is usually that we're distracted from feeling something in our body right here and right now. And we're living from that place of being with ourselves. We're actually more available. Time starts to slow down. And when time slows down, you feel like you can get more done. And so I think that's what I would speak to around that question. Okay. Mm. Yeah, so I just reading through some of the comments. I'm just wanting to acknowledge how amazing you are, how amazing you guys are, and who you are in your hearts is so much bigger than the story of whatever we came up with growing up. And I think the thing that people hold on to most, our possessions that we're most holding on to in our life, are our thoughts about who we think we are, and also our past emotions of who we think we've been. And for the most part, we hold on to those more than our car, more than our house, more than our prized possessions. The things we hold on to most of all are our opinions about the world and who we are, our thoughts, basically, and we hold on to our feelings. And for the most part, those come from the past. I mean, they're not even, it's like you don't even have to be there to think those thoughts again or to feel those feelings again. It's like they're already there and available to you. You can just sit back and think about them over and over again. And they just come up because they're not you. They're memorized. They're memorized thoughts and memorized emotions that have become ingrained into our nervous system. And until we let go of this old nervous system, we can't replace it with a new one. And when I say your nervous system, what I mean is this set of patterns that's interwoven from our brain and also throughout our body of pain and pleasure networks. So that gives us our habits in life. It gives us our behavior in our nervous system of what's okay to do, what's not okay to do. This is going to make me feel good. This won't make me feel good. And that pretty much has us run on autopilot. And in order to create a different kind of quality of life, you need a new nervous system. And if you're a part of the book club, I highly recommend checking out the book that they're reading. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. And it goes into the neuroscience and basically talks about how who we are is a result of memorized emotions and memorized thoughts that are literally ingrained into our body and literally ingrained in neural networks in our brain, and cause us to behave and think in the way that we've been thinking throughout our whole life. And so the thing I would like to share is about being more than your nervous system and being more than who you've been in the past, and allowing yourself to let go of the thing that we're holding on to so that something new can show up for ourselves. And letting go, interestingly enough, it's like the analogy I always do is I hold like a pen or something. So I have like a case over here. So a lot of times we think of letting go. Think if I let go of the thing I want the most, and I'm going to drop it, I'm going to lose it, and it's not going to be here anymore, and I have to hold on to it. But in reality, the thing that you love most in your life, the thing that's on your heart, universe, God already knows what you want, already knows what you love. And so, and holding it together, what we're really talking about when we say let go is we say stop squeezing so hard, on the things that we're trying to have or the things we're trying to not be. Life already knows what you want, already knows who you are, and probably knows it better than you do, because even like what we really want in our life is still tied to some kind of past ego or a trauma that's trying to heal. But universe knows who you are at a soul level and wants to heal you. And so letting go looks like not squeezing so hard on life. And so letting go just looks like opening up and making space for what's there. And as you let go and make space for what's there, new things can happen, new things can grow for you. And so the question is, what is it that you're holding on to that you haven't made okay, that it just be there? And that you have to squeeze or force or make it be a certain way? Or maybe which person in your life are you changing or forcing or holding on to a certain way that they are, or maybe a certain way that they aren't and that you want them to be? And what would it be like to give space, not just for how you're feeling about it, but also for who they are and they exist. And you give permission for life to exist. And when you give permission for life to exist, life can embrace you back. And when your love for life matches the kind of love that life and God have for you, what you want begins to show up in your life, not because you're forcing it, but because you've made space for yourself to actually receive it. And so for all the people who are in the coming home online journey, again, what this can look like again is taking time and taking space to be in the body. I recommend taking, I like to sit down for an hour or two just in silence. And it's changed my life. And the first 30 minutes can be kind of rough, because when you sit down for the first 30 minutes, it's like separating yourself from all of the craziness in our minds, and it allows us a slow descent into the body. And so the first 30 minutes sitting in silence, it might be 20 minutes or 10 minutes for you, or a little bit longer than 30 minutes. But after that time period, what happens is that you shift into your body, and now you can start to hear your soul. You can start to hear your heart. In a neurological level, what happens is your brain waves shift from being in high beta, focused on the prefrontal cortex, and you shift into alpha. And so you're emitting different brain waves at that point. And so the difference between beta and alpha, which you'll find if you're in our book club, and beta is the normal consciousness where you're making conscious decision making. It's focused on the prefrontal cortex and your prefrontal lobe. That's where your sense of time, your sense of identity, and also where you do a lot of your problem solving happen in the prefrontal cortex. And when you're operating in beta, that part of your brain is working. And in high beta or in beta, that's how most human beings are. That's also the age that you get into high beta after you turn 5 or 6 years old. And you're kind of like a functioning adult at that point. Before you hit 5 or 6 years old, you're in what they call alpha. And so you're emitting alpha brainwaves. And in that state, it's very much like make believe or pretend or being hypnotized. And it's kind of like that a little bit before falling asleep. You're awake very much, but you're kind of in a dream state. And children before 5, 6 years old are in that state. So like when I think of my 3-year-old Sammy, when he puts on a cape and says he's Superman, he's not playing pretend. In his world, he is Superman. And so everything summons up to be that way. And the magical thing about shifting from a beta to an alpha is that now your nervous system is highly suggestible, and you can begin to rewire your brain. You can actually begin to rewire your nervous system, and you can begin to let go of things. It's almost like getting into the subconscious. I don't know if you guys have read different books like The Body Keeps Score, but new science is showing that what psychologists used to think of the subconscious is not located in the brain. It's actually located in the nervous system throughout the body. And so when your brainwaves switch, when you descend into the body, you're able to work on yourself at a subconscious level. And you're able to make real changes to yourself on that level. And that's what the breath work really begins to open up and offer to you, is this ability to be able to make real change to yourself on that kind of level. Because you can't do that on a high beta level where you're just thinking about it. You can't think yourself into a new emotion, and you cannot think yourself into a new level of consciousness. You got to feel and release whatever is trying to do all the thinking so that something new can show up in your life. And so that's what I would offer around the idea of getting into a new nervous system and taking time for yourself to be with whatever emotion shows up for you there. Okay. So there's a few questions around two emotions. So one of them was around the sensation of resentment and also indecision. And I think I'd mentioned earlier that resentment comes from consistently dishonoring your heart and then making something outside of yourself wrong for it, you know, and it can also be making yourself wrong for it too, but it's making something wrong about us dishonoring our hearts. And so when I talk about dishonoring our hearts, what I mean is that when we get in tune with our bodies, our heart begins to tell us what aligns with us and what doesn't align with us, what's going to serve us and what's not going to serve us in our life. It's different from just preference. And this shows up all the time. You know, someone asks you to volunteer for something, and in your body, there's some kind of resistance that shows up. You actually physically feel it. And we don't feel totally right about it. Like my whole body isn't saying yes to this. Like this is a 10 for me. I want to do this. There's some kind of resistance in ourselves. And when we don't take time to honor that sensation of resistance in ourselves and be with it, it causes resentment towards ourselves. We actually start to feel the impact of not being aligned with who we really are or aligned with our hearts. I mean, our body's trying to talk to us and your soul is trying to talk to you through your body. But when we don't listen to it or we dishonor it repeatedly, what happens is we begin to become either resentful or depressed. Depressed can come from the sense of almost like you feel like you just want to go to sleep. It's because we can no longer keep up the charade of who we think we are, who we're trying to present ourselves to be, that's so out of alignment to who we are at a soul level, to who we are that we want to be. And so it actually causes us to begin to shut down. It's like the nervous system of who we are and driving it. The nervous system is trying to make things work and trying to have things operate in a certain way that we want is so out of alignment with our soul that it's causing us to shut down. Jim Carrey says that being depressed is like deep rest. It means that this identity that we've been holding on to needs some real deep rest and needs to be let go of because we're tired of being that person over and over again. Resentment comes from the sense of this, it's an added sense of anger, meaning we're still forcing it, we're still into it, we're still forcing this thing to go a certain way, and we're dishonoring who we really are. And so when we notice deep resentment that's coming up during our time for sitting, is taking time to really look at that. And underneath resentment, what we'll tend to find is anger. And underneath anger, what we often find is a sense of being hurt, of feeling hurt. And underneath the sense of hurt is sadness. And underneath the sadness is a sense of loss. And so the sense of loss can be simple. It can mean I lost the sense that I am who I thought I was. I thought I was going to be, I thought I was an amazing performer and I could do these things and make everything work this way. But sometimes I'm not. And in the sense of allowing yourself to feel sad around the loss of that, the loss of that idea. You know, or maybe I thought that I could be perfect and I realized I'm not, and allow yourself to feel the loss of that so you can release the idea that doesn't serve you anymore. This idea that that I do have to be perfect, or this idea this person has to be perfect, or that. I remember there's a sense of release for me around a resentment towards my dad, and a sense of, I remember that my dad was a superhero to me, and I was like, my dad can do anything. And I remember the first time I experienced my dad not being able to do anything. And I would just kind of ignore it and let it go. Or I noticed that my dad had fluctuating emotions. Sometimes he might be happy or sometimes he might be sad. And I thought, like, who's my dad? My dad can't be like that. He's got to be consistent in this way. And over time, it started to build up resentment. And when I took the time to sit in silence with that resentment, what I realized is that there's a sense of loss of who I thought my dad was. And it was getting in the way of me being with who my dad really is and receiving love from him as he is and letting God love me through who he is versus who I wanted him to be. And I realized I was making him wrong for not being who I wanted him to be inside my head. And that resentment was building and building. When I let myself let go of it, there's a sense of tears, but also forgiveness for my dad, towards my dad, for maybe not necessarily being this consistent, unchanging superhero in my life, but also this forgiveness for myself for making my dad have to be that kind of person and then treating him negatively because he wasn't living up to that. And so resentment comes from consistently just honoring our hearts and making something or someone else outside of us wrong for it. And when I say making it wrong, meaning saying it's not okay. And when we say it's not okay, what we're really saying is I can't be okay with this. And what we're really saying is I'm not okay underneath that. And when we say I'm not okay, it doesn't work because you exist. You're already okay. If you weren't okay, you wouldn't exist. Because you exist, you're okay. One of the most amazing quotes by that I love from Thich Nhat Hanh is that he says that love is giving something permission to exist. And when we say I'm not okay with that, what we're really thinking, even though we're projecting onto the thing that we think it is, what we're really saying is that I am not okay. I will not allow myself to exist with this particular thing. But your brain or universe doesn't care about the particular thing. It just hears you saying, I am unwilling to exist. You know, I don't give myself permission to exist with this thing like that, this idea in my head that I don't even know if it's right. And so at a deep fundamental level, we haven't really given ourselves permission to exist moment by moment with whatever shows up in our bodies. And we then project the same thing onto the people in our lives. And just like we're not giving ourselves permission to exist and we're trying to hustle and get with the busyness of life and make it all work because we haven't given ourselves permission to exist, that's how we treat other people too. And so when we meet them, we see somebody else not hustling, not getting their work done, not doing what they need to be doing. We don't give them permission to exist either. And so we project the same dis-ease that we have in our own bodies towards other people. And when we begin to stop that, sit in silence, and begin to be with yourself, be with your heart, you begin to give permission to yourself to exist right here, right now. And then what also happens is you give other people permission to exist right here, right now, as they are. And it doesn't mean that work doesn't get done. It doesn't mean that things don't happen. Actually, I think it's that the opposite is true. More gets done because we're more here. And time literally starts to feel like it's slowing down in the body because you're more present and you're more here and you're more able to be able to think clearly about the things in life because you're not coming from this state of something is wrong with this. And so your actions aren't, coming from this place like my dad was never this ideal superhero and couldn't do the thing that I wanted. And so I actually am not okay with that, which means I'm not okay with me. And that's why I have to work so hard to do this thing because I'm just trying to get approval of myself because I can't even approve of myself like I wanted to, or we're still trying to get our mom to recognize us and love us the way that we wanted to. Maybe we didn't have that. And so a lot of our actions are coming from this place of being not okay with ourselves deep on a body level. And so we're not able to get clear on the things that we want. And then it shows up as resentment or these different unfelt emotions that aren't there. And because we don't want to feel those strong emotions, we go further up into our heads so we don't have to feel those emotions. And then when we're more in our heads, there's more of your nervous system and past thoughts driving you to solve whatever problem we think is there based off of whatever kind of previous way of doing things you thought was going to be the best way of doing them. So if you're a go-getter, you're going to just make it happen and slam those problems away. If you're a shy person, you hide away from those problems. If you're a pretender, you kind of say everything's nice, everything's okay, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine. But that's like secretly terrified and fearful of things falling apart and not working. Whatever way that we kind of grew up, our personality developed to respond or react to the problems of our life or to the perceived losses in our life, we just default into that. And then that set or pattern of memorized emotions and memorized thoughts run our lives. And they don't even care if we're happy or not. They don't even care. They don't care if we have joy in our lives. They just want to survive. The story of who we think we are, the shy girl, the confident man, the nice guy, is just trying to survive. And that's the story that's concerned about survival in ourselves. That's not who you are. It's not who you really are. And so we have to let go of the story of who we think we are. And even begin to let go of this. And part of that is also the story of who we want to be. Like I'm going to be this way and I'm going to be this way. But oftentimes that's still an underhanded way or a backdoor way of the same old story saying, I just don't want to be a failure. And that's why I'm going to be amazing, or I just don't want to be a screw up. And that's why it's going to be amazing. Or I just don't want to be alone anymore. And that's why I'm going to be super bright and super connected. And so it's important to watch out for those backdoor stories that are really just the flip side of the same old story that we have. And it's nice because all you got to do the work is just kind of sit down and be with yourself, and magic can happen in the release of that, and in the giving permission to exist of who you are. And what you get connected to is completely new ideas start to show up then, because now there's space for them. Before, there's no space. Things couldn't fit there. It's just stuffed with ego and past and story of who we think we are, and then unfelt resentments and emotions and suppressed joy. And once we start to feel those things, who we are starts to open up, and we can begin to make new decisions in our life, make a new leap into our life. And the vision that you have for your life, the future that you want to make it real, make it like have your heart sing at a 10. I'm going to be going to a conference and I'm going to be talking about having a calling in your life. And having a calling is like, it brings forth something amazing out of you. It's like it brings out, I don't know, the Oprah, or I don't know, whoever it is that you are excited about, but it brings out this newness inside of you. And it feels like that's who you really are. And it also can simultaneously terrify or scare the small you, the small ego. And it's not necessarily the small you, it's terrifying your past, because it means if your vision is this big and it's out over here and you want to be all of this, then it knows that this old nervous system, this old pattern is not going to take you there. This level of consciousness is not going to get you there. Meaning that as you move towards this vision, you're going to have to let go of this. Jay Shetty says that if you want to have a whole new life, you get to let go of the old one. And a lot of that, even though we think that we don't want our old lives because we don't like them, or they're painful, or they're sad, or they're depressing, the truth is they're familiar. And we might have a particular sadness or a resentment come up. And if you take time to sit with it, you might also notice that there's a familiarity to it. Even though it might be painful or uncomfortable, there's a familiarity to it. And that familiarity that we have is it gives us more security than just pleasure. Having something that's familiar is nicer to us than having something that's actually awe-inspiring and lights your heart up, but is totally new. Even if you you get a brand new house and it's super exciting, when you first go into a brand new house, it's a little weird, being in there, and it's kind of feels uncomfortable, even if it's great. And so we tend to default back into this old self, this old nervous system, these old set of patterns and behaviors. And so what you want to do is, one, have a vision that really inspires you. And then along the way, what you'll get to see is you'll begin to notice more and more of this old personality in your meditations with yourself, taking time for yourself, or even just in daily life. You'll notice them more come up. And what there is to do isn't to push them down and suppress, like say, get out of there, I'm on my way to my vision, I don't want you here. Instead, what there is to do is to take time to love what comes up and offer it up. Like, offer up your ego to God, offer up that old you to God, and release it and set them free, and actually honor them for the work that they've already done in your life. The person who's just trying to be nice and be the people pleaser, that identity showed up at a critical point in your life when there was maybe real trauma going on with friends or at school or at the family or with your parents. And the people pleaser showed up and maybe got you out of a scary situation, or a situation where you weren't sure how to deal with it, and it took care of you. And in a big sense, these old nervous systems, these old patterns in our minds and in our bodies are almost like veterans. And they've gone through hell to protect us, to keep us safe, at least who they thought we were. And as you outgrow them and you move on in life, it's important to recognize them, give them the Medal of Honor for the service that they've done. And because they're like beaten up, have PTSD, they're just struggling, and they actually can't function in a normal world. It might have worked maybe as a 5-year-old you, but it doesn't work very well as a 35-year-old you. And so what there is to do is to retire them, but also acknowledge them, release them, liberate them, honor them for what they were trying to do, because it was still coming from love. It's still coming from love, even though it's dysfunctional and maybe doesn't work. And, it's the thing that has you, not call that person that, you probably need to call or want to call, or has you not take the leap. It's important to kind of honor them and offer them up to God, offer them up to your higher power and to the universe so they can be free. And then who you become is no longer that ego. You're the one who's honoring them. You're the one that's holding space for them. You're the one that's big enough to offer them up. And who you are, you become filled up by God. And, I wish I could draw one of the 4-position foundations here, but you literally start to feel like universe and life is flowing through you, because who you are is the space for God and universe to flow through you. And you give that same space to your old self, to your old ego, when they come up as emotion in the body. So, gosh, we were originally talking about resentment, and I got all the way over here. And so the idea is when we notice resentment, when we notice anger, first thing to notice is that I haven't been honoring myself. That's the first thing to notice. I haven't been honoring my heart, and nobody else is responsible for you to honor your own heart. That's on us. It's not anyone else's heart. It's you. That's with you. That's with you. And so the idea is asking, and it's also like a task of learning how to honor our hearts. I mean, for me, when I started beginning this kind of practice, I didn't even know what I had to do to honor myself. I didn't even know what I wanted. You know, I had been a people-pleasing, oldest sibling, I don't know, noble, suffering martyr boy for so much of my life. And when it came to like trying to figure out what does it look like to take care of that little boy, what does he actually want, I had no idea. And so a lot of times, especially if you were like if you're a recovering approval addict or a recovering people pleaser, sometimes we have no idea what we want, because who we are has always been catered to the needs of whatever situation or the people that are in our lives. And so it's kind of like there's a learning curve to figuring it out, you know. It's like, oh gosh, the person asked me to volunteer for this thing and I said yes, and I feel like that wasn't honoring my heart. And so you're trying to feel it out and honor your heart. You're not exactly sure what you need. So you're like, I'm just going to not do it. But then you're like, that doesn't feel so right either. And so you just keep sitting with it, and it's okay. Don't judge your life out of one day. It's like a learning process. And as you begin to kind of reparent yourself and allow yourself to be reparented by life and by God, you begin to get more in tune with your body and who you want. And I gotta say, now when I'm living, my body is I'm so attuned to what's aligned and what's not aligned, and it shows up instantly. Aligned, not aligned, yes or no. And I'm able to kind of reach back into alignment whenever it comes up. And it can be simple things like at the restaurant, like, do you want ice in your water? And it's like, oh no, that's not aligned. I don't want ice in my water. Or we're all going to go outside and watch a movie. Do you want to come? And I can just breathe and say, I really love you guys, and I'm just really excited to stay here and be with myself and feel comfortable and confident saying that without being embarrassed. Early on, it might have been like, hey, David, you want to go to a movie? It's like, no, I'm just tired of everyone asking me to do things. And there's like still resentment spewing out of me, you know, like this. I haven't figured out how to say it the right way yet. And it's not, and that's not what I mean to say. It's not say it the right way. Haven't learned how to feel it fully, because there's like years of resentment that are coming out. So I haven't fully felt it all. And so part of me like is honoring my heart, like saying, I do not want to go out. I actually want to stay with myself. But part of the resentment that's unfelt kind of spews out at the same time. Blah, I haven't been doing it. I'm angry at my dad, and this is going on. And it kind of, shows up like that. And so be okay. Give yourself some space and some be patient with yourself and compassionate to yourself as you're on the journey of learning how to live from your heart and listen to your body. Because honestly, sometimes your body's pissed. It's like, it's like, you haven't been listening to me for like 30 years or like 25 years, and now you're going to start doing this. I got some stuff to tell you. And so then these huge emotions start coming up, and you're like, whoa, this is crazy. But just remember, you're not what's coming out. You're the space that's holding room for it. You're the butt. You're not the poop, okay? And all that's, it's the same thing too. Because all you got to do is sit down and relax and let things release. You're going to be okay. And yeah. And so the invitation is just, I'm so excited for what gets to show up in you as you're going through this process. Because sure, it might mean that there might be tears or release that comes up for a day or maybe for a week or so. And things might want to fall apart in your life internally, emotionally. Things might want to fall apart and be released. Or maybe externally, the way that you've been holding up your life and trying to patch it all together, maybe those things also want to fall apart too, because you've been holding them together with that old, smaller consciousness that can't take you to where you want to go. And so maybe there's a sense of this older consciousness that's trying to hold together your finances or your job, and maybe it's not working. And it's like, I don't have time to meditate, David, because I got to pay the bills and everything like that. But maybe what you're doing to pay the bills and get it all done is exactly what's keeping you away from abundance. What you're doing to make money is actually what's keeping you in the, is actually what's in the way of you making that money that you want to have, because it's coming from this small consciousness. It's being held together by this survival inside, this survivor, and this person who's afraid of not surviving. And as we begin to let that go, the things that it was holding up also start to be let go of too. And then it actually allows life to begin to support you in new ways, and it starts to carry things for you. In some cases, I noticed, for me, I was so worried about, what's going to happen to me, what's going to, like, because there's a time in my life where everything was just falling apart. The way I had lived my life, what I had looked like to my community, who I thought of myself as a father, as a husband, how I thought of myself as an entrepreneur and as a coach, as a business person. It felt like everything was really coming apart and falling apart. And I was like, how am I going to do this? How's it going to work? I can't hold it all together anymore. And I know that I'm feeling the sense of like the old me washing away, and not a new me showing up, but rather just space for something new to show up in. And then what happened is that the most moving experience I've ever had with God in my life showed up. It's like for a period of a year, I felt like God was carrying me and my family and my life every step of the way. And there was a sense of serendipity and literally just being carried. And a sense of, as I'm falling apart, or as my life felt like it was falling apart, it felt like Heavenly Parent or the universe or life catching me and carrying me through. And part of it was carrying away the old nervous system, the old past pattern of doing things, and letting them be washed away in love. And then me like having no idea what's going to show up afterwards. Like, I'd love to have a new awesome me. Can I have the awesome me now? I kind of want that, but it's like, wait 2 weeks, wait a month, because there's so much I've been waiting to tell you. There are so many lessons I've been waiting to share with you. There's so many blessings that I want to prepare you to receive. And it was just like this amazing experience where I was afraid of not being able to be around my children, being afraid of having a terrible relationship with the mother of my children, having a terrible relationship with my church community, having a relationship with myself that I hated, being a failure financially. I was scared of everything. And what I got instead was that God literally carried every area of my life that I've been worried about. It's like God said, don't worry, I got that. And the universe said, don't worry, I've got that. You just keep letting go so that I can carry it. It's like, let go, keep making space. And what it looks like now is like I'm in the discovery of who I really am. And every time I think like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing thing. I didn't know I could do this. I didn't know I could travel around the world or go to the Middle East or make a difference here or apply for a PhD. The universe says life is like, I'm not done yet. There's actually still more. You're not this new nervous system either. How about you let that one go too? And then God opens up more. And I get excited again. I'm like, oh, is this who I really am? And God's like, no, there's still more. There's still more. And what I want to share with you is that life wants to transform the world through you. That life is literally unfolding itself and transforming itself through you. And it wants to do that through you. It's not about getting a job. Your employer is life and is God. And when you work for God, you are a contribution for the world. And I'm not just talking about ministry, but when you get in the business of allowing the universe to flow through you as you're doing this kind of work, there's a book inside of you. There's a movie inside of you. There's something that wants to get out of you, that wants to come through you, that life wants to experience what it's like to be in you and share with other people. And all there is to do is begin to trust and to have patience with the crying baby survivor old version of who we thought we were, allowing that to be not destroyed or gotten rid of, but allow it to be released and honored and offered back up to life and to the universe. And who you become is no longer stuck in some way that you are, but rather who you are becomes almost like an embodiment or a model of what life can be, of what God wants to do through you, what the universe wants to do through you. And I know I keep saying God and universe, and so I'm trying to speak to whatever it is that's for you, because some people get hung up on the language. But what I'm looking for is this experience of connection to something bigger than who you are. Okay, and whatever that word is for you, if that's being or a space or a universe or a God, don't get hung up on the words. I'm talking about an experience. Okay, this isn't a relationship with a concept or an idea. This is your life. That's what I'm talking about, is your relationship to life, and that life, and also life's relationship to you. And for me, that's just, God shows up for me, Source shows up for me. Those are the words that I use around it because those resonate with me. So hear what resonates with you. Use the word that resonates with you. And it's just there's so much grace and so much amazingness that wants to flow through you, and it's just waiting to get out. And all there is to do is not about just saying this is what I want and I'm gonna go get it. It's more about, this is the old me that I've been holding on to. This is the old life I've been holding on to, and I've been scared to let it go because we're only aware of what we're going to lose. We're not aware of what we're going to gain. We're only aware of what's going to be leaving us, of what's no longer going to be there. We're not present to like the amazing grace and things that want to flow into your life. It's like, sure, we want abundance, but we don't know what's going to happen if I let go of this job. I don't know what's going to happen over here. So we can only see what we're going to lose. We can't see what's going to be coming in. And so I invite you to be kind to yourself. Don't judge your life over a day, and feel your emotions, be in your body. As you're hearing this message, take a deep breath. And if you don't have 30 minutes or an hour, well, first I confront the idea that you don't have 30 minutes or an hour. It's like we spend 8 hours a day working for somebody else. You can spend an hour with your soul, by the way. It's like I used to think that I had to have a meaningful, deep, connecting conversation with another human being each day just to feel like myself, because I love connecting. I love being with people. But now I want to have a deep, meaningful conversation of being with myself every day. And there's so much to get out of being with your soul, out of being with your heart every day. 20 minutes with your soul isn't going to hurt you. It's going to enlighten and open up your heart. It's going to open up God to flow through you. And the idea is, if you want, start with 5 minutes, start with something, but allow yourself to give yourself permission to be with your soul, because, I'll wake up in the morning and I'm like, I got to get this done. I got to call that person. I got to do this thing. Oh my gosh, what's this person going to think? Or I'll say, oh, I'm lonely. I miss people. Where are my friends at? What's going on? I wonder how this person's going. And then I'll just sit with silence for an hour or two. And when I finish, I'm like, I don't got to call that person. I don't got to do that thing. I don't got to make that call right now. This thing is going to be okay. I am okay. Everything is fine. And from that place, it's so much easier to be able to accomplish things. It's a paradox. It's easier to accomplish things when you're not worried about accomplishing things. And then when you're worried about accomplishing things, you actually don't get as much done. And it's like, you're only like 15% of the vastness of who you are. And what happened is that we think we're worried because we're at 15%. We got to make this happen. I'm tired. I'm sleepy. I'm resentful. I have unfelt emotions. I'm living in this old nervous system and memorized patterns of emotions and thoughts. And I just don't have any time. And so we just hustle and we push it and we push it and we push it at 15%. What you could accomplish for 5-7 hours, maybe even a week of just nonstop pushing it at 15% is nothing compared to what you could do in an hour at 100%. 3 hours of yourself at 15 is nothing compared to yourself for 10 minutes at 100%. Because not only are you aligned with your heart, or your spirit mind and your spirit body are aligned and supporting one another, but you're also connected to all of life and the universe, and it wants to bless you. It wants to support you. It just needs space to fill you and to move through you. And so that's what I want to share with you guys today. I appreciate your questions, appreciate your time. If this video supported you, please feel free to share it with others. I love you. I invite you to get present to the love that you are. Make space for yourself. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but if you've ever looked in a mirror at yourself, I invite you to take 30 seconds and just look at yourself in the mirror like it's another person, and just be kind to yourself. Give loving eye contact to yourself, and continue to live wholeheartedly. And I'm excited to be able to share my journey and my process with you, as I'm also learning to do the same. So love to you all, blessing to you all, and light to you all. Thank you. Take care.